Vast multitudes.
Your powers collide.
Who are you in this vast multitudes?
Oh, man, I feel like I've been doing this forever. I wonder how long I'm going to have to keep doing this for. Al! Al! Al, where are you? Where did he go? Let me get Al back here. Al! Hey, Al, how long am I going to have to keep doing this for? Ziggy says that you're stuck here until the plasma apocalypse, or until you help this guy JayDreamerZ to reach 1 million subscribers. Okay, well, we'll do our best. We'll do our best for today. Today we're going to be talking about seraphim, or serpents, actually. Now, a serpent is not a snake. That's pretty much the title. That's good. That's what we're going to be taking a look at. I'm going to share with you the esoteric, which is the secret meaning behind these serpents. Some people see the serpent as being evil, representative of the devil, Lucifer, Satan. But throughout time, using comparative mythology, we can see that antiquity presents a different image of the quote-unquote serpent. I'll be sharing some pictures with you. And say goodbye to Al. We'll see you later, Al. Now check this out. This is a snake. Okay. This right here, this is not a serpent. And not at all. Now they've become to be known as serpents because they're called serpents because they're named after something in antiquity that has a similar appearance, or has a snake-like appearance, we would say. Oftentimes we project onto the unknown the things that we do know, so that it can help us to sort of navigate the mysteries of antiquity. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the serpents, the seraphim. And I'll have some pictures up over here. I'll also be referencing a Wikipedia article just to sort of help me and prompt me with some things that I wanted to talk about and remind me of some things that when it comes to the serpent. Now this is a serpent. This is a Chinese version of the serpent. Many of you would see this and say, well, that's a dragon. The dragon and the serpent are the same. Now, I'm not going to be talking about physical phantazoids, otherworldly monsters, gigantism, anything that is physical, as in an actual animal. And we are going to be talking about the serpent in the Garden of Eden and the Bible as well. But take note of what it looks like here. Here you can see that in ancient times, the serpent was very long. Sometimes they would add feet onto it. Oftentimes it would be portrayed as having a face. Usually when it was described as having what looked like a human face. But oftentimes, in addition to the serpent, you'll have the serpent chasing a ball, a sphere, an orb, sometimes actually holding it in its mouth. Holding onto the ball in its mouth. What is that ball? I'll tell you in here in just a bit. Sometimes it'll hold on to the ball and it's with its front hand, but it's always chasing after this ball, also known as the fiery pearl that the dragons guarded or sought after. Here's another version of the same thing. This is a serpent. This is a cartoonified version of a serpent. This is a serpent that's been drawn to have human-like facial features and stuff. We've projected onto it. As you can see, the ball in its mouth. This is the origin of Dragon Ball, or the last Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Z. And this is an artist's impression of plasma as it's moving about and leaves a trail of ionized gas behind it. This is what many people are seeing today in the skies above when they're witnessing strange lights moving about in the sky, and they attribute them to being craft or UFOs or, you know, unknown things, and they think that they're physical objects, but they're not, technically. They're ethereal objects. They're subtle objects. Just as the serpent, as he was described in the Garden of Eden, was more subtle than any creature. He was a subtle form, an ethereal form. This right here is ball lightning. This is plasma in the atmosphere. And as pressure increases in this world, as all of the gases are being released from the ocean, as the ocean waters get hotter and hotter, they're releasing massive amounts of gas, and the earth itself releasing massive amounts of gas, it's adding to the pressure in our world and creating and returning us back to an atmosphere that's more electrically charged, which is what we can expect after the plasma apocalypse happens, after the sky rips open and there's a depressurization. Here's another artist's impression. So this one's real, allegedly. And this one right here is an artist's impression of a ball of plasma, or ball lightning, as it's commonly referred to as. It's hard to find research on these because the internet has become so flooded with just pictures of plasma balls, as in the toy, as in, you know, a crystal ball, basically. But take note of what it looks like and how it's been described. It usually has a ball at the front, which is a torus field, but then it trails off behind it, right? Here's another version of it. I like these as well. These are just to stimulate your creative mind, because plasma balls are hard to come by. Actual ball lightning is difficult to witness. However, these days, people are witnessing it and even recording it more and more and more. In antiquity, people still saw it, especially if the further back we go in antiquity. There's stories galore about plasma balls, strange lights, orbs, fiery snakes, and serpents. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles actually talks about how fiery serpents infested the region and parts of the world at certain points in time, when people were also seeing beams of light rise up into the atmosphere, terrestrial beams of light rising up from the earth, and other battles, heavenly battles that were happening above. But here you can also see that they have the trail behind this electrical ball of light. Now, it's also the exact same glyph that means life in Paleo Hebrew, or ancient Hebrew, before the modern stylized Hebrew form. It's also Phoenician. It's a Phoenician picture form, which turned into the very first alphabet. It's called Nun. It's basically the letter In, meaning Nachash, which is the Hebrew word for serpent. But it also literally means life, and it represents the number 50. If we were to take a look at the Paleo Hebrew alphabet, or the Aleph Bet, it starts up here on the top. It goes from right to left. Because the energy was different, we had a polarity shift a long time ago. We've had many different polarity shifts, and each time we have a polarity shift, everything gets reversed, including our way of thinking, including the direction that we read and write in. So you can tell which polarity we were in oftentimes by looking at the dominant alphabet and the writing styles of the time, and which direction people read in. This one up here is basically the letter A. It's a picture of an ox head. B, or Beit, which is a house with a room inside of it. Gimel, and it goes all the way down to this one. This one right here next to me, this is the letter Nun. This is the glyph that meant life, something that brings life. And it's a trail of plasma, or ionized gas, with the plasmoid, or the ball lightning, at the front of it. Other people interpret it in different ways. Some people say it's a snake, or it's the seed of life of man, or whatnot. Here it is again. This is how it was originally written. The letter Nun, meaning action, life, substance, chi, energy, all these things. Now, let's break down the word seraph, as in seraphim, right? Many people who have read the Bible, or even if you haven't, you've probably come across the angelic class known as the seraphim. right? As it's commonly called in English. Let's break that down. The core of the word seraphim is seraph. The I am at the end is basically just a plural. It just means more than one. But if we look at the root, which is the first three letters, S, R, and P, sarap, or serp, as in serpent, right? Let's take a look at it. Now, the first letter is shin, and it's written just like this. And as you can see in the modern, it even kind of looks like fire because it conveys a sense of fire. That's really literally what it meant. And it also conveyed things like to eat or to destroy, as fire does. It's a consumer. It eats things, right? So that's the first word in seraph or seraphim or serpent. The next one is resh or resh, which is a picture form originally of a person's head. And it implied a head, or the top, or the foremost, right? Or the first, you could say. Aleph also means first, but let's not get off track. So, fire, and then head. And then the last one, pe, which is P. It just simply was a picture of a mouth, an open mouth specifically, and it implied things that the mouth implies, like speech and to talk, right? So if we put all three of these together, the three core letters that mean serpent, we have fire or divine fire in many instances, right? Divine fire, which is also plasma, a head, right? Or the front, and then speech, right? Teaching, to talk, to convey. This is exactly what a dragon is. This is exactly what a serpent is. According to antiquity, right? The serpent, the dragon, these were wise beings that taught mankind and imparted revelation and seemed to work with our neurons, our brain, and amplified our ability to gain certain knowledge that we don't have today in a world that's lacking energy, in a world that where the energy is being charged down into the depths of the earth, soon to be released and bringing us once again into a golden age. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play a slideshow here because I've got various pictures while I talk about the subject more in depth. So I'm going to go ahead and play this slideshow. Okay, very good. I'll just put the slideshow off to the side here while we have a nice little discussion. Good to see everybody in the chat. Thanks for showing up today. Happy holidays. I hope you're enjoying the day. All right, sweet. Now, serpents. Now, I'm just gonna kind of chime off of the Wikipedia article here because it's gonna remind me of a lot of things that I want to reference. Serpents in Hebrew, nachash or nachash. It's a hard guttural. That nachash is actually more of a G sound, or has turned into a G sound over time. So you could also say nagas, right? Nahash or nahas and nagash or nagas. The Nagas are referred to in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. The symbol of a serpent or a snake played important roles in the religious traditions of cultural life of ancient Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Canaan. The serpent was a symbol of evil power and chaos from the underworld, as well as a symbol of fertility, life, healing, and rebirth. Well, that's interesting. It symbolizes two complete, seemingly opposite spectrums, right? It's seen as something that can be totally destructive and evil and, can oftentimes whisper sweet nothings into people's ears, possessing them to do damage and to do evil or whatnot, right? But on other occurrences, other instances, the Nahash or the Nagas, they were seen as life-giving, that they were seen as things that made the world more fertile and contributed to healing and growth, just as plasma does, as we've talked about. Now, Nahash, Hebrew for snake, is associated with divination, including the verb form meaning to practice divination for fortune-telling. Like I said, these serpents, these dragons, they imparted wisdom to some people. Okay, so they're basically fairies, they're sprites, they're all these different types of, angelic, ethereal, it's plasma, basically, right? And the legends say that if you catch one, that you could use it to benefit you. That some people would say this turned into like getting wishes over time, making your life better, giving you prophetic visions, opening your mind, essentially. But it could also erase your memory. It could also do all kinds of things. This is just like fire. Fire can be used as a weapon. It can be used as a form of destruction. It can hurt if you don't know how to handle it, if you don't know how to use it. But it can also be used to create and to cook and to change things for the better, right? Now, Nagas occurs in the Torah to identify the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Throughout the Hebrew Bible, it was used in conjunction with seraph, which we've just explained and gone over, to describe vicious serpents in the wilderness. Now, specifically, when they're talking about the wilderness, I believe that they're not talking about the Middle East as it is today in the modern world, but I believe that the Garden of Eden was at the North Pole. And surrounding the Garden of Eden is where we have today's Arctic Ocean. But back then, there was no water. There was no ocean up there. It was desert. It was the sand that was left over from the prior ocean. And it was electrified. The entire region was electrified. Why? Because there's a huge protective plasma sheath, an electromagnetic force field, if you will, that covered over the entire island. And just outside of that island was a strong electrical charge, as well as many other plasma volcanoes and stuff that are in the region. So that entire desert was electrified, and it was oftentimes full of flying, fiery serpents. Now, obviously, snakes don't fly. We've got the flying snake or whatever, but it just kind of falls. It glides through the air and falls, which is cool. I like that. But that's not what it's referring to. These seraphim, these flying, fiery serpents that were plaguing the Hebrew people who were lost in the wilderness, trying to find their way back home, these would bite the people, but it wasn't really a bite, okay? It would burn them, essentially. It would electrocute them. It would shock them. And they would have side effects like being stunned, being paralyzed. Death would also be, one of the side effects from being bit by these things. Now, in the modern world, people believe that they are serpents because they have forgotten all about plasma physics and plasma and plasmoids and torus fields and all of this knowledge that, only some of us are just coming to relearn. So they personified them. They cartoonified them. They made them into the only thing that they could relate them to, which was an actual snake. Now, let's continue on. The tanin, that ayin at the end, that's just Arabic for making something plural, just like the im in Hebrew. Okay, so it's really tan or tin or tun, however you want to pronounce it. The tanin, a dragon monster, also occurs throughout the Hebrew Bible. Now, the tanin is the same type of thing as the seraphim, okay? They're just different forms that plasma can take on. So they're given different descriptors or names, right? It's also the root of, it's also Biff Tannen's name from Back to the Future. And it implied a dragon monster, specifically one that had multiple heads or branched out from the source, just as plasma tends to do, like a hand does, A dragon monster also occurs throughout the Hebrew Bible. In the book of Exodus, the staves or the staffs of Moses and Aaron are turned into serpents or Nagas for Moses and a tanin for Aaron. Their staffs, their rods, their beams, right? As in plasma beams, as in beams of light, beams of energy, right? They turn into these serpents. They turn into these snake forms because they're actually plasma. They can be wavy and they can be made to be a straight beam like a laser beam. And in the New Testament, the book of Revelation makes use of the ancient serpent and the dragon. They go hand in hand. The serpent and the dragon are the exact same thing, in this particular scenario. They talk about this several times to identify Satan or the devil, the adversary, the energy that is opposed to the life-giving energy. And both are snake forms. Both are plasmas. Both are energy. One energy pulls in, takes away from. It's selfish. One energy gives away freely and contributes to the rest of the world. These are the two opposing entities. The serpent is most often identified with the hubristic Satan and sometimes Lilith. Lilith is another discussion, but, she's also associated with snakes and plasma and stuff, and demons and stuff like that. The narrative of the Garden of Eden and the fall of humankind constitutes a mythological tradition shared by all of the Abrahamic religions, Christian, Judaism, etc. With the presentation more or less symbolic of Judeo-Christian Islamic morals and religious beliefs, which had an overwhelming impact on many different aspects of society. Let's see. Now, of course, we have the fall, which is closely related to original sin, ancestral sin, when sin entered into this world. Now, sin is the letter Shin that we first described. It looks like the fire. It looks kind of like a W. Remember that one? It looks like a W or whatever with little flames at the top. That's the letter Shin, or sin, depending on how you pronounce that. Sin entered into this world. It's another form of plasma. There's two different main ones. There's terrestrial plasma, which is life-giving, which is the type that contributes and adds to healing of the nations and whatnot, comes up from below. And then we have the one that drops down in from the skies or the heavens as Santa Claus or fallen angels and things of that nature. And that's the Shin that falls. That's the Shin, or the fire, the divine fire that falls down from the heavens. And Shin enters into our world. Okay? Now, it goes on to talk about the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, the book of Genesis refers to a serpent who triggered an expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. Serpents is also used to describe sea monsters, sea serpents. Plasma can exist within the water. Not pure water, though. Okay? But it doesn't like pure water. Pure water with no impurities. Or in some ancient languages, that would be called mari. Mar, meaning a large body of water. And then the E, or the I, technically, at the end of it just implies a place of, or a possessive form. So, Mari, or Mary, were the undefiled waters where the plasma couldn't get into. It couldn't defile that particular region, which is at the center of the world surrounding Rupus Nigra in a large crystal lake. Now, where was I? One sec. I got distracted by my own little tangent there. And there's a train going past. Let's see. Oh, that's right. Sea monsters. That's right. So we're talking about serpents and sea monsters. Plasma can go through the water, especially if the water is brine, especially if the water has electrolytes like salt inside of it. That's why, you know, people like Gatorade or whatever to give them more energy and to rehydrate them and stuff. It's not really to rehydrate them. It's got electrolytes inside of it. And what those do is they allow the electricity, or your spirit in your body, to flow more freely throughout your body, through all the places where the water goes, and the blood, and things like that. The life is in the blood, as the Bible says. So, in those places where the water is mucky and has electrolytes, like salt, then plasma can freely move throughout the water, in the water, under the ocean, and in different places too, which is also where the serpent is said to lie, under the ocean. Now, if it's at the center of the world, it's trapped under that large body of water, if it's indeed fresh water, without the impurities. Examples of these identification are used in the book of Isaiah, where a reference is made to a serpent-like dragon named Leviathan. And in the book of Amos, where a serpent resides at the bottom of the sea, just like we talked about. Serpent figuratively describes biblical places such as Egypt as well. There were some lands that were known for being the lands of the serpent, the lands where people knew the serpents resided, which is oftentimes because it's locked in place, because this is terrestrial plasma, the terrestrial serpents. These are the good dragons. And this is also why dragons come in many different colors as well, because the dragons, the serpents, the plasma is created by gases becoming ionized or activated, you could say, or electrical in nature. And depending upon which gas it is, it will reflect a different color. Each gas, when it's ionized, has a different color on the color spectrum. So, for example, that's why Hades, or the underworld, or the realm of the dead, or the necropolis, is almost always presented in an otherworldly green magical kind of glow, because that's the color that gas ionizes, is green, that sort of emerald green color. Serpent figuratively describes places, like we talked about. This is also, within Islam, there's a place called, what was it called? Iram of the Pillars, I think it was called. It was a legendary city that had pillars, massive pillars that reached up into the heavens. Now, today, people believe that they were physical structures of some sort, but I don't. I believe that they're the exact same as the pillars of Hercules, that they were beams, terrestrial beams of energy and plasma. Now, let's continue on. Places like Egypt, the city of Dan. The prophet Jeremiah also compares the king of Babylon to a serpent. So, you will have representatives of good and evil, both being compared to the seraphs, or the seraphim, the serpents, the serpent beings, the serpent creatures, different forms of plasma, because it's positive and it's negative, because it's electromagnetic. Jesus also is no exception, and we'll get there. Eden. Now, in regards to the name Eden and the place, that's the first chapter in my newest book, which is called Return to Hyperborea, which is all about this terrestrial plasma and what the world is like whenever we go through this next apocalyptic cycle, and what it was like in prior apocalyptic cycles when the lights erupted from the earth itself, creating the first settlements, the first cities, and of course I break down the Garden of Eden, where it is, what it means, what the word means, etc. The word Nagas, is used in the Hebrew Bible to identify the serpent that appears in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 in the Garden of Eden. So originally, think about this. If Eden was such a perfect place, why would there be this evil being there? Why would there be this evil snake or serpent or devil or whatever, right? There's more to the story. In the first book of the Torah, the serpent is portrayed as a deceptive creature or a trickster who promotes as good what God had forbidden and shows particular cunning in its deception. The serpent has the ability to speak and to reason. Now, hold on. I want to comment on this. I've heard many people talk about how, the serpent was a talking animal. Why is it that we don't see Eve is freaking out because she's talking to a snake that can talk to her? Why isn't that strange, And while I do believe wholeheartedly that the animals could speak with the humans and vice versa through telepathy, which is how I believe that that's done, I don't believe that the serpent was a talking snake, as in the snake that we have today. But it was energy that can convey messages or information or even activate the very own information that you're unaware of. Your subconscious, the other 90% of your brain that you're not even using. Okay? Now, it goes on to quote, "Now the serpent was more subtle." Also, that word subtle is translated as cunning, which I think is a poor translation if the word is actually subtle. Plasma is subtle. The ether is subtle, okay? Not intelligent as in cunning, as in I'm going to try to trick you, or it has some sort of, agenda or something. The serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field, which the Lord God had made. Now, many people read this and they equate beasts of the field, and it's more cunning than any beast, and they believe that means it is a beast. It's some kind of an animal, but it's not. It was more cunning than the animals. It was more subtle or ethereal than the physical, actual land-dwelling physical creatures that have the spark of life inside of them, which is spirit. There's no indication in the book of Genesis that the serpent was a deity in its own right, although it is one of the only two cases of animals that talk in the Torah, Balaam's donkey being the other one. Now, Balaam's donkey, that's a case of an animal actually speaking, but I don't believe that the serpent speaking is an animal talking at all, because I don't believe the serpent is an animal. I believe snakes have a serpent, meaning a spirit inside of them, but I don't believe that they are the seraphim. And I don't believe that the snakes used to have legs and that they walked around like little tiny dragons talking to people or anything. And then one day their legs were just cut off or stopped growing or whatever as some kind of punishment or whatever. I get that, and I can get how that would be, what people believe. But that's not my belief at this time. Now, God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden to tend it and warned Adam, "Do not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." The serpent tempts Eve to eat of the tree, but Eve tells the serpent that what God had said. The serpent replies that she would not surely die, and that if she eats the fruit of the tree, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil, which is a whole different subject as to, I mean, it's interesting that they didn't know good and evil up until that point. So Eve ate the fruit, which is also not a physical fruit. Okay. And gave some of it to Adam, who he also ate. As a matter of fact, the whole apple, well, I guess I do want to talk about the fruit for just a moment. You may have seen an image that I used AI to create to replicate the Garden of Eden, or a form of it as I see it. And you'll see it come back up over here, but it's got a mountain in the middle, and it's got this sort of force field branching off from the sides. That's because plasma comes up from the earth, from the Septentrio, or the 7 mountains, or the 7 plasma volcanoes that surround Rupus Nigra, which is Mount Meru, which is the throne of God, which is a plasma volcano. And those beams of energy create a plasma sheath, or that protective barrier, and then it folds in towards Mount Meru at the very tip, creating the top of the apple, or the fruit. You'll see that pop up here. So Eve eats the fruit, and she gave some to Adam. He also ate it. God, who was walking in the garden, learns of their transgression. To prevent Adam and Eve from eating the fruit of the tree of life and living forever, they're banished from the garden. And he posts an angelic guard. Now, this angelic guard, there was an angel that was like told, hey, post up here at the entrance to Eden, which is east of Eden, which is east was actually up, which meant it was above Eden. That's how you get into Eden, was from above. This angel was called a cherub, or a cherubim, or a cherub, right? It was known as a covering angel, and it covered the Garden of Eden. It covered and acted as an ark of a promise, an ark of a covenant, basically, right? And that's why the angel's wings always touch in the middle, covering the actual chest whenever people symbolize paradise, or the Ark of the Covenant, right? And this is also why inside of that plasma sheath, or that barrier protecting the Garden of Eden, they have a staff, because there's a beam, which is the axis mundi, which is the beam of light that comes up out of Rupus Nigra, and they have a jar of manna, because that's where manna is created. Okay, and I get into how manna is created and what it's comprised of and stuff in my book Return to Hyperborea. All right, let's continue on. Now, this debate about the serpent in Eden should be viewed figuratively or as a literal animal. That's what they say. According to one midrashic interpretation, the midrash is like commentary from Jews that have studied really hard the Torah. It's just commentary. According to their commentary, the serpent represents sexual desire. I don't believe so, but I do believe that whenever we live in an environment like that of Eden, right, underneath a gigantic electromagnetic barrier that's constantly invigorating the energy within, which includes your spirit and your soul and your body and the energy all throughout. You become charged, okay? And a part of that charge, a part of that amplification of your very own energy is the amplification of sexual desire, okay? So it doesn't just amplify sexual desire only, but that is a byproduct, okay? And people are young. It stimulates collagen, elastin, cellular regeneration. It's the fountain of youth. Another interpretation is that the snake is the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is a term for humankind's congenial inclination to do evil. I don't believe that whatsoever, okay? I believe that the whole sinful state has nothing to do with some energetic force that is causing us to be evil. Now, like I said, there's a positive force and there's a negative force, okay? And if you see it as good or you see it as evil, that will all depend upon your place on the polarity scale, on the pole. Like, where do you see it? If you see it way over there, it's probably evil. If you see it close to you or beneficial to you, then you'll see it as good, okay? And this is luck. This is fortune. This is Loki and God, or Gad, as it's called in Hebrew. Where was I? Oh, Okay, so let's see. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. It was so decidedly a real serpent that all of its species which had before walked on their feet were condemned to crawl on their bellies. No serpent, no animal of any kind is called Satan, Beelzebub, devil, in the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. So what they're saying is because of the biblical story and how it's described that this plasma force was cursed to crawl on its belly, what that means is it lost its wings. Okay, these cherubs, these covering angels, the heavenly plasma, something happened to our atmosphere to cause that plasma that was once seen above, flying around as fiery serpents and fire worms and dragons and whatnot. Something happened to make it get lower and lower and lower until finally it went down into the earth or under the earth, into Sheol or Hades or the underworld, where all of the energy currently resides. And that is the sinful condition in this world. That's entropy in this world. Energy on the surface is literally physically being siphoned by the earth down into the heart because it's charging, getting ready to release it back to us, to share that energy with us once more in the future, as it does on a cyclical basis. Let's see. I'm going to skip a bit here. All right, so some scholars interpret the ancient serpent in the New Testament. They equate that with Satan, the bad guy, etc. Now, in my perspective, I teach people about what I call the Anode and Cathode mountains. Okay, so there's different elements that go into the whole Garden of Eden, the cosmology, the geography, and just the area that is in the north. And there's different places because it's electromagnetic in nature. It acts as a battery. It acts as a cell. It's cellular, and because of that, it has a positive side, and it has a negative side. It's got anode and cathode to it. One will act, depending on your perspective, as evil. The other one will act as good. All right, let's continue on. All right, let's see. The serpent, which now enters the narrative, is marked as one of God's created animals in the narrator's mind. Therefore, it has demonic power, blah, blah, blah. Hold on, let me skip this part right here. Moses and Aaron. So let's talk about Moses and Aaron. Aaron is Moses' brother. So you know Moses that parted the Red Sea and that whole story? Well, he had a brother, and his name was Aaron, and he was the high priest of the Hebrew people. When God had revealed himself to the prophet Moses in the book of Exodus, Moses recognized that the call of God was for him to lead the people of Israel out of slavery, but anticipated that people would deny or doubt his calling. Now, I also want to point this out. Just like how we broke down the word seraph, we can break down the word Moses too. It's Moshe, and it means to be drawn up out of the water, to come out of the water. So this staff that comes up out of the water represents that beam of energy, terrestrial energy, that bursts out of Mount Meru at the center of the world, Rupus Nigra. Right? The names are unimportant. There is a gigantic magnetic mountain at the center of our world, which is the North Pole. Okay? That's what I'm referring to. I just like to call it Mount Meru because it's M&M. I like Rupus Nigra because it means the dark mountain. It's a magnetic mountain made of magnetic material. And that's why your compasses point to it. All right, now. Moses, Moshe, right? And that means to be drawn up out of the water. And he has this staff, right? So there's this staff, there's this beam of energy that comes up out of this central lake, which is a pure and undefiled lake, which is where Moses was found, and he was pulled out of the water of the Nile, which, by the way, all these locations, place names, river names, lakes, all that stuff, in antiquity were at the North Pole. I believe. That's my theory, okay? And then as the people were expelled from the North Pole, they became nomadic in nature and circled around the Northern Hemisphere, eventually settling in place after place, and then, using their superior knowledge through, a vast experience from extended lifespans, they took over those places over time. But they renamed the new places after those of antiquity, from the Garden of Eden, or from the place that goes back to the very first settlement, which is the Garden of Eden, which is Hyperborea, basically. Now, let's see, where were we? Moses and his calling. Moses knew the people would doubt him. Moses asked God how to respond to such a doubt, and God asked him to cast the rod, his staff, the beam that he held, which he carried onto the ground, where it became a serpent, or Nahash, or Naga. Moses fled from it, but God encouraged him to come back and take it by the tail, and it would become a rod again. This is manipulating plasma, right? The story exists on multiple levels, and that's how I was taught to read the Bible, was that there's many different levels to actually read it on, okay? So we're talking about various levels here, all right? Now, if my level doesn't match your level, that's okay. That's just where you are on your path, and it's where I am on mine. So Moses has a staff, Aaron has a staff. There's always going to be these two beams. Usually there's 3 beams. There's a central one, and then there's a negatively charged and a positively charged, the anode and the cathode on either side. Fiery serpents. Oh, wait, did I want to keep talking about Moses? I don't know. I think I'm going to just keep going. Fiery serpents. Now, these seraphim, these serpents, they were originally called fiery ones, that they glowed, that they gave off their very own source of light. That's literally what they mean. It means burning, right? Burning implying like fire or like a light, right? Which burns. Also shocking, right? Shocking, both like surprising and actual being shocked or electrocuted by electricity. Fiery serpent, or seraph, burning, in Hebrew, occurs in the Torah to describe a species of vicious snakes whose venom burns upon contact. I don't believe that that's talking about snakes whatsoever, or else it would have called them snakes. It's talking about plasma and the different forms that plasma can take, specifically filaments that are moving about through an electrically amplified atmosphere that don't just disappear like in today's world, where we have different conditions, where lightning tends to just be a quick flash. Now, you'll take note that as the gases build up and the pressure builds up in this world, lightning's starting to last a lot longer because there's more gases and it's being ionized more, and all that pressure allows it to travel about easier, basically. So lightning lasts a lot longer. Lightning flashes, they're spreading out much more than they ever used to. They're just staying up in the sky a lot longer. They're striking the same place over and over again. That's what I've noticed, at least. So these seraphim, these fiery serpents, had venom that burned upon contact. Now, according to some historians, seraph corresponds to the Sanskrit word sarpa, or sharpa. Serpent, sarpin, or reptile, from the root sarip, or serpere, or seper. These burning serpents infested the great and terrible place of the desert wilderness. Now, this is also the same story of ancient Ireland, right? Because modern Ireland is the same case. It's not the original Ireland. The people that settled there named it after where they had come from, which is the fat land, the land of promise, the good land, the land of plenty. And that's literally what Ireland means. Okay? But Ireland also had this whole problem with the snakes, and then you had St. Patrick and that whole story where they got rid of all of those snakes, right? Same exact thing. And this is why I like comparative mythology. We can see the truth in seemingly different scenarios, situation, and historical events, and we can take out those things that resonate across all of them to put those puzzle pieces back to see a more clear picture of things. All right, so the Hebrew word for poisonous literally means fiery, flaming, or burning. This is describing plasma, electromagnetics, as in the burning sensation of a snake bite on the human skin, a metaphor for the fiery anger of God. I don't think it's a metaphor at all. I think it's physical and actual, that there were these sky snakes that came down and would zap people. They would bite them, okay? Same thing as the holy bees, okay? So plasma has been described and personified in many different ways. Sometimes it's snakes, sometimes it's bees or other insects or animals or whatever, right? It's just stories. People are trying to tell the story, but they don't know the substance to it. So these bees, these holy bees, people would also seek after them because they had this honey that could, heal people and make you live longer and stuff like that, which is just a byproduct of plasma as well. Same concept. And you know how people protected themselves from the holy bees, according to legends? They would put on armor, metal. They would put on copper, bronze armor. Why? Because it creates a Faraday suit. just like a Faraday cage, right? It redirects the flow and the current of the plasma to follow the metal that's outside of the body so that it goes straight to the ground and grounds itself, just like a lightning rod, right? And it's interesting too. Well, we're coming up to the brazen serpent. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Brazen means bronze or bronze-like, but we'll get there. The book of Isaiah expounds upon the description of these fiery serpents as flying seraphs or seraphim. The flying dragons. In some translations of the Bible, it literally calls them dragons. In the land of trouble and anguish, which is right outside of Eden. Isaiah indicates that these seraphs are comparable to vipers, right? Worse than any ordinary serpents. Ordinary meaning, of the world, or human, or snake-like. The prophet Isaiah also sees a vision of seraphim in the temple itself. But these are divine agents with wings and human faces, and are probably not to be interpreted as serpents so much as flame-like. So what he's talking about are these strange descriptions of these angels. Have you ever actually read the physical description of angelic beings in the Bible? They're fire beings. They're plasmoids. They're plasma beings that take different types of shapes. You'll see some pictures up here of them. And in today's modern world, they look exactly like what are known as transient luminous events in the heavens or in the sky, which is basically sprites. They're electromagnetic phenomenon called sprites. The word sprite means spirit. It means actual spirit, life force, plasma, electromagnetics, right? And in a sprite, its wings will go up, and then it'll come down to what's known in plasma physics as a Z-pinch, or it'll just fold in on itself, basically, and then it'll branch back out. So these sprites, these spirits up in the heavens, these flying serpents or fiery serpents, they were seen as having these. Oh, there's one right there. Now, those side wings don't count, okay? Those side wings are just wings that are added to show you it's flying through the air, okay? So it doesn't have those. It's this top one and this bottom ones, and that's a sprite, okay? I'm glad that those photos popped up at just the right time. Isaiah indicates that these seraphs are comparable to vipers. We read that. These are divine agents with wings, human faces, probably not to be... Oh, I already read all that. Let's go on to the brazen serpent, okay? By the way, I put this image because this talks about how people will handle the serpents and not be bitten, right? And there's a lot of religious movements that sort of came from that, where people think that it's cool to actually mess with real snakes, like your David Blaine or something. You can, that's fine, okay? But I think it means something different. I think, especially if we're talking about plasma. Now, the serpent of bronze. Let's talk about bronze. In the book of Numbers, while Moses was in the wilderness, he mounted a serpent of bronze on a pole, a staff, a beam, a pillar, a column, right? On a pole that functioned as a cure against the bite of the seraphim, the burning ones. The phrase in the book of Numbers, 21, chapter 9, a serpent of bronze, is a wordplay, as serpent, nachash, and bronze, nachashet, are closely related in Hebrew. Nahash, Nahoshet. Nahash, Nahoshet. Okay? So it's basically the same word repeated twice. It's the Nahash, which is the serpent, of serpents. And let me continue on. It'll make sense here in a second. Mainstream scholars suggest that the imagery of the fiery serpent served to function like that of a magical amulet. Now, I'm just going to tell you what I think it is, okay? So there's a story. They were in the wilderness. There was all these electrical snakes coming down from the heavens, flying fiery serpents that bit the people, shocked them, basically. So Moses, which means drawn up from the waters, erects a staff, a beam, a pole, and a light. And when they looked to that light, they were healed of the effects from these red, glowing, fiery serpents, the negative energy, right? Which I believe can possess people or amplify your negative tendencies. I call it plasma possession, which I think is going to happen. You'll see more examples of that in the future, I'm quite certain. But anyways, it's symbolic of the beam at the center of the world being erected, the blue beam, the main biggest one that comes up out of the earth. The people look to that, and it changed their minds. Just like it says in the Bible in the New Testament, what was it, in Acts? It says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? Paul wrote that, I think. And that's what was happening. Their minds were being transformed whenever there was all this negative energy in the form of these fiery snakes all over this electrified desert. And they looked to the healing snake, the healing serpent, not snake, I shouldn't say that. The healing serpent, the healing plasma, the healing light, right? Now, bronze. I'm going to skip this next part because I just want to talk to you about the word bronze. Why was it bronze? On one hand, bronze is a conductor. Copper is a conductor, and that's why it's used in electromagnetics and, electronics and stuff so often, as is gold, as is other elements and stuff. But it's not that it was physically actually a bronze serpent, but it's the word bronze that is important. If we go all the way back, the word bronze is directly related to the word brown. But not brown as in dark in color. Originally, in Proto-Indo-European, the word brown, brun, meant to shine. It meant to glow. And therefore, those elements or metals that shined and glowed, they were named such, glowing elements, glowing metals or crystals or whatever, right? So they're named after a description of what they did, which was to glow, not to reflect the light of the sun or anything. It's not a reflection. It's self-luminous. So that's what bronze originally was, self-luminous. That's what it was described as. At least that's one of my theories on it, right? And I believe that there were many metals, many crystals that actually glowed from absorbing radioactive energy during this event. And that there were beings at the time, a long time ago, that had us, or humans, not us, humans, go seek out these glowing metals because they were using them to extend their lifespans and to heal them and their skin and all this type of stuff. That's a different story. Let's continue on. In 2 Kings, in the Bible, is a book called 2 Kings. A bronze serpent, alleged to be the one that Moses made, was kept in Jerusalem's temple sanctuary. There will be a serpent in the temple, in all of these types of temples, but not a snake, though. It's not a snake. It's not Satan worship. It's not evil worship or whatever. It's just worshiping one form of energy or another, right? You have the Moses energy, which represents terrestrial good energy or whatnot, and then you have the energy of what were those two wizards, those two magicians that worked for the Pharaoh? Janus and Jambres? Is that what their names were? Anyways, we have opposing energies, electromagnetic forces, positive and negative, right? Now, if I'm positive and you are negative, I will see you as evil and you will see me as evil. That's just how it works. It's perspective along the lines of those polarities. Now, let's get into the New Testament, right? A lot of this has a Christian flair to it, but it applies across the board to every religion, every belief system. These are symbols. This is symbolism that goes all the way back to the very beginning, okay? Snakes of creation, serpents of creation, these different ethereal and subtle animal forms that helped to create this world. The original gods and the titans and things of this nature. Now, in the Gospels, in the Gospel of Matthew, John the Baptist calls the Pharisees and the Sadducees that were visiting a brood of vipers. Jesus also uses the same imagery. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers. I'm giving Jesus a pirate accent. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Okay, so that's what Jesus sounds like in my mind for some reason. So, brood of vipers, brood of serpents, they're of their father, the devil, the serpent, the dragon, right? There's two different ones. There's the healing serpent and there's the not healing, the destructive force, right? The selfish one, the one that takes energy instead of giving it away. Now, Jesus was also himself compared to that same serpent that was lifted up in the wilderness, lifted up in the desert to provide healing to the nations that were being bit and bombarded and possessed by negative forces or negative serpents, electromagnetically speaking. Jesus also presents the snake with a less negative connotation when sending out the 12 apostles. Jesus exhorted them. He encouraged them. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise. I can't get the pirate accent out of my head. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So Jesus here admits and says and gives credence to the fact that serpents are wise. They're associated with being clever, wisdom, knowledge, right? So this is not talking about some animal. It's not talking about a slithering snake on the ground and I should just consider all snakes are really wise or whatever. Okay, great. So are elephants. So are many different types of animals. Okay, there's many different types of wise animals, but it's the energy. It's the strength of that energy, right? That can amplify your very existing energy to make you wise, right? Or to give you more intellect or whatever it may be. In the Gospel of John, Jesus made mention of the Mosaic serpent when he foretold of his crucifixion. And he compared the act of raising up the Mosaic serpent on a pole with raising up of the Son of Man on a cross, because they're the same event. It's the same thing. Some people within Christianity call this a Christophany, which is an appearance or a foreshadowing of Jesus himself. Sometimes they actually believe it was Jesus in the past, just sort of cyclically repeating and making these appearances and stuff. It is, to me personally, because this is a cyclical event that we're talking about. I call it the plasma apocalypse. It's a polarity shift. It goes back and forth, you know, the season of Satan and then the season or the millennial rule, right? Now, the temptation of Christ. In the temptation of Christ, the devil cites the book of Psalms, and he says, "For it is written, he shall give his angels charge." Charge is an interesting word to use. "Concerning thee, and in their hands they shall bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone." That stone being the stone directly underneath where Jesus stood, which is Mount Moriah, which is Mount Meru, which is Mount Sinai, which is all these holy mountains, Mount Olympus, etc., and so on and so forth, where he lives, where he is born, where he dies. That's that same hollowed out mountain or cave. It goes on to say, "Thou shalt tread upon lion and adder." The word lion also is equated to light, okay? And you can go on to X and read my last article I wrote. It's all about the word lion and the word lamb and how they mean light, okay? And that's why that type of symbolism is used. Why? Because those giant animals, like giant cats, are from Eden, okay? Lions are giant cats, period, okay? I don't know how people don't make that connection. They're living proof of gigantism. They're getting smaller and smaller over time, okay, but they're from inside the earth, all right, and they're named after these places where they come from, and those are places of light. Now, the serpent in the book of Psalms is identified as Satan by Christians, and then it's got some Latin here that translates into the asp and the basilisk you will trample under your foot. You will tread on the lion and the dragon. That's because Jesus, as the squatter man figure in petroglyphs, the beam of energy that shoots up out of Mount Meru, right below are his feet, which is that plasma sheath that wraps around the Garden of Eden, right? In this sort of squatting legs of the Titan Atlas, who stands with his arms outstretched in similar form, in the opposite direction, seeming to hold on to the apex dome, or the central portion of the firmament, which bows inward like it's a planet or the moon or, you know, some celestial object up there. Now, this passage commonly is interpreted by Christians as a reference to Christ defeating and triumphing over Satan. Yes, that happens. The passage led to the late and antique and early blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip this part. Hold on. So there's the basilisk. That's basically the same thing as a serpent. The serpent is often shown curled around the foot of the cross in depictions of the crucifixion of Jesus. Yes, that's because that's the Ouroboros. It's a circuit. It's an electrical circuit in the form of that sort of umbrella dome that covers and protects the Garden of Eden. It moves in one direction, and it spins around, and people outside and inside could look at the walls of Eden, which are ethereal in nature. Right below those are actual walls. They're like gigantic cliffs. But they could see that there is this sort of rainbow serpent that is spinning around that island slowly, chasing its own tail, so to speak. All right. That's also the Skull Mountain, He-Man's Castle Grayskull, Adam's skull, Golgotha, etc. That's that place. Now, the ancient serpent. We're going to talk about Greek myth and mythos. In Greek, serpent is ophis, O-P-H-I-S, and it means or implies snake, and has come to imply snake and serpent. And it occurs in the book of Revelation, written in Greek, as, or coin, I believe specifically. Coin, that's interesting. Anyways, in the book of Revelation, as the ancient serpent or the old serpent, right? Used to describe the dragon, Satan, the adversary who is the devil. The serpent is depicted as a red. Now, this tells you the color of the plasma, which means you could decipher and figure out what the gases are if you understand, if you get more context as to what's happening in that region, you can understand the origin of these things. The serpent is depicted as a red, seven-headed dragon. Okay? The 7 heads are 7 mountains surrounding the Garden of Eden. They are volcanoes. They are empty, hollowed-out mountains that erupt or release gases that ionize. Man, I'm going to have Al on there the whole presentation. My bad. I just wanted that for the intro. But also, as a side, if you guys don't know what that's from, it's from a show called Quantum Leap, and it's literally about everything I'm discussing right now, if you have the eyes to see it. The guy stands in a blue beam, okay? It's a great show. And the dude has a smartphone. It's crazy. He talks to AI and stuff. Great show. Anyways, I'm off track. Let me get back on track. We're talking about the book of Revelation and the beast, the serpent, the 7-headed dragon. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. If you don't believe me, read the book of Revelation for yourself. It will tell you. It removes all the mystery. It says in plain text, the 7 heads are 7 mountains. Now, some people will say, "Oh, well, that's the Vatican, because there's 7 hills nearby." Listen, there's a huge difference between a mountain and a hill. Okay, the Vatican is not a qualifier. That's not the right spot. That's not the right place. Or as they say in Indiana Jones, they're digging in the wrong place. Okay, they have their geology and geography wrong because they've forgotten their origins. All right, so a red 7-headed dragon having 10 horns. They split at the top, each housed with a diadem. A diadem is a crown. So above these beams of light, you have halos, or in if we're thinking about transient luminous events that happen like lightning in our world today, they would be called elves. Okay, so high, you got like lightning, you've got blue jets that go upward, like backward lightning that shoots up as a blue jet into the higher atmosphere. Above that, you have sprites, which I've already discussed. And then above that, you have the elves, which are literally halos of light above these celestial beings. Now, 7-headed red dragon, 10 horns with a halo around each one. The serpent battles Michael, the archangel, in a war up there in the sky, which results in this devil being cast out to the earth, or down to the earth. While on earth, he pursues the woman of the apocalypse. I like that they call her that instead of her other name, and gives power and authority to the beast. Unable to obtain her, he wages war against the rest of her seed. Okay, I'm just going to summarize all this, all right? Basically, it's an energetic shift. Okay, we go through an energetic shift. The millennial reign, the reign of Jesus, has come and gone many different times. Okay, we're not in it now. Okay, to each their own. You can have your perspective. And this is how I see many people's perspective. It's just not looking at all. You can have your perspective. Oh, by the way, that's the apple. Okay, that's the apple, the fruit. You can have your perspective. That's fine. If you think that we're not in the season of Satan right now, you can have that perspective. That's definitely mine. That we live in an energetically lacking world where energy is lacking. And it's the proof of that is how often you sleep and your desire to eat and consume. Those are just two of many proofs. Okay, I believe we live during what I call the season of Satan, Satan's little season, however you want to call it. Okay, but opposite of that, cyclically occurring over and over is the Millennial Reign. The 1,000 years where the light of the world erupts or manifests or is seen by all, and it brings healing to the nations, and the crops grow, and everything grows to gigantic sizes, and the atmosphere is electrically amplified, and people see wonders and signs, and magic exists. And that's on the way. All right. All right, let's continue on. The biblical Apocrypha and Deuterocanonical books. Man, what a word. The first Deuterocanonical, man, let me break that down so people understand what I'm talking about. Deuteronomy is one of the books of the Torah, or the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Canonical means it's been canonized. Canonized has nothing to do with a cannon that shoots and fires, but it means it's a part of, it's legally accepted as like law, basically, by religious people, specifically Catholicism. Okay, that's what it means. So that means that they have taken a writing and they have given their stamp of approval to it. Okay, so this is in reference to Old Testament writings that they have given their stamp of approval to. Okay, the first deuterocanonical source to connect the serpent with the devil may be the Wisdom of Solomon, which was an ancient writing. The subject developed more in the pseudepigraphal apocryphal Apocalypse of Moses. Jesus, that's such a mouthful. Let me also explain what that means. Pseudepigraphal apocryphal Apocalypse of Moses. Okay, Apocalypse of Moses is the name of the book. Pseudepigraphal means false writings. Okay, pseudo means false or fake or wannabe. And then pigraphical has the word graphic in it. It means writing, basically, right? So false writings, they're not really false. They're just not in the canon. They're not recognized as accepted by, the holier than thou or the Catholic leadership. In the book of the Apocalypse of Moses, okay, and these are so interesting, okay, they kept out all these books that are titled Apocalypse of so-and-so, Apocalypse of Abraham, Apocalypse of Moses, Apocalypse of Adam, you know what I mean? Like, there might be a reason that they're hiding the apocalypse from all of you, which is fine. Whatever. The life of Adam and Eve, it's also called, where the devil works with the serpent. Christianity, following the imagery of chapter 12 in the book of Revelation, Bernard of Clairvaux had called Mary the conqueror of dragons. Mary represents Mount Meru itself at times, giving birth to the light, but also sometimes represents the surrounding waters, or a combination of both, right? Those crystal clear waters that I talked about at the North Pole. And she was longed to be shown crushing a snake underfoot, also with a reference to her title as the new Eve. Mary as being the new Eve, which is interesting because her son is a type of new Adam, which this sort of, if you understand your myths and your legends about various religions, especially pagan ones, you can see that there is a connection to Tammuz that might be there, or at least it sounds like there could be one, which there should be, because all of these stories are related, I believe. Now, why does Mary crush the serpent underfoot? Because that energy, like I said, goes down into Hades. It goes down into the earth. All the energy is being drawn down into the underworld, under the actual surface where we walk around right now, which is why we lack energy, which is why we live during sinful times and conditions and degradation. Everything's falling apart, entropy, right? So all that plasma is built up, and there's pressure right down there below the surface. Encanto comes to mind, the Disney movie Under the Surface. It's the same thing I'm talking about right now. I don't want to get distracted. Okay, there's so many branches we could go off of. Let me try to keep it focused. Mary stands on top of, as does Adam, okay, or Eve, or Jesus, all of them. This is why the serpent is at the base or beneath the cross, etc. Is because there's a lake of crystal clear waters there. And like I said, plasma can't go through crystal clear waters with no impurities, okay? The plasma on top, even when it is there, it will seem to dance upon the top of the water. It won't go through it because there's no electrolytes, like I talked about. Now, Gnosticism. Let's talk about Gnosticism. Now, first let me explain what the word means. Gnostic, that ick, anytime you hear an ick at the end, like Amarik, America, right? The ick sound is the same as saying ish. Ish, it's kind of like, right? Same thing. Nos, or no specifically, it's G-N. It's spelled Gnostic, okay? Gnostic. The G is silent. It didn't always used to be silent, and it meant gan, which means garden. This is the place of knowledge. This is why Gnos, or Gnosticism, means knowledge, or knowledge-like, or seeking knowledge. It revolves all around knowledge, right? Gaining information. Gleaning, right? Which is similar to gleaming, which is to shine and to shimmer. Gnosticism originated in the late 1st century CE, which is right around the time of the last, the reset that we had, the apocalypse, the cataclysm that we had, that ushered in the Dark Ages. Okay, that's the whole right around the time that Jesus died, basically, right? When the beam of light retracted, and we no longer had energy filling up our atmosphere. So people sought after knowledge at that time. They wanted to retain it. They wanted to keep it. They wanted to remember it. They wanted to write it down or whatever. Gnosticism originated in the late 1st century CE in a non-rabbinical Jewish and early Christian sects or portions thereof. In the formation of Christianity, various sectarian groups labeled Gnostics by their opponents emphasized spiritual knowledge, or gnosis, right? So we've got the word know, or new, G-N-U, same thing as the animal, right? Damn, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but it means of knowledge, okay? The O at the end is the Vav, and it just means attached to, or it means of Eden, or of the place of knowledge, right? All right. I'm sorry about all the little things on the side there. So they emphasized spiritual knowledge of the divine spark within over faith, or pistis, in the teachings and the traditions of various communities of Christians. Gnosticism presented a distinction between the highest unknowable God, or the Demiurge, or the creator of the material universe. The Gnostics considered the most essential part of the process of salvation to be this personal knowledge, in contrast with faith as an outlook in their worldview, along with the faith in the ecclesiastical authority. Let me explain that in layman's terms, okay, or in simple terms. You have knowledge versus faith. Now, biblically speaking, faith is defined as something that is evident by what you believe. That's faith. Faith has nothing to do with your beliefs, as in your belief is your faith. No, that's not one and the same thing at all. That's what it's come to mean today in the season of Satan, where the devil is in charge of everything, okay? But faith and belief in the ancient world were two different concepts. What you believed manifested as your faith, or your actions, or what you do, okay? But they weren't the same thing at all. One is a byproduct of the other. So we've got these people who are seeking after knowledge. Now, what do you do with that knowledge? That's where wisdom comes into play, okay? You can have all the knowledge in the world, but how you apply it, what decisions you make, what actions you take afterwards will define you, essentially. Now, what does all of this have to do with the serpent and the snake? It's because of the serpent and the snake imagery, right? I don't even know if I have a picture. I can't remember. It would be helpful right now if I had a picture instead of Al's face up here. Cake Town just donated 5 JayDreamerZ memberships to random people in the chat right now. Wow, and it's the Appear in the Credits memberships too. Thank you, Cake Town. There's going to be some brand new credits coming up this month that I'm working on. All right, sweet. Let me continue on. Now, my point is that they have symbolism. All right, one of the symbols is the lion face. There's this entity with a lion's face and a serpent body, or some people would see a snake body, right? And oftentimes people would call this Yaldabaoth, which oftentimes was equated with Yahweh or other types of creator gods or whatnot. It's usually seen as living inside of an egg, or an egg shape, which is, like I said, that plasma sheath that wraps around, that plasma dome or whatever that wraps around the Garden of Eden, I believe. And then you have like a shining sun that goes around its lion head. Remember, lion means light, okay? Or of the light, or of the flowing energy, which is literally what it means. But that's not the sun, okay? Because they'll put the sun star off to one side and the moon star off to the other to let you know that that other one is not the sun. That's something else. That's the apex dome. I'm getting pretty far off base here, so let me just continue on with the serpent talk. In Gnosticism, the biblical serpent in the Garden of Eden was praised and thanked for bringing knowledge, gnosis, to Adam and Eve, and thereby freeing them from the malevolent demiurge's control. So, within Gnosticism, and this is just generalized, okay, this is a broad generalization. It by no means represents every Gnostic or anything, just like the Christian stuff we've discussed by no means represents every Christian out there, okay? These are just generalizations, little signposts along the path, okay, to help you. So some people see the serpent, either way you look at it, the serpent was a dragon-like fiery divine being that imparted information to Adam and Eve in some way, shape, or form. Gnostic Christian doctrines rely on a dualistic cosmology, right? Positive and negative, just like we talked about, that implies the eternal conflict between good and evil and a conception of the serpent as the liberating savior and bestower of knowledge. Now, before you go, oh my God, no, he didn't, right? Remember, Jesus Christ himself, since we're within Christianity, okay, was seen as a serpent type also, right? Just like the serpent, the brazen serpent and stuff, he himself is the serpent type. That's why there's a serpent on the staff of Hermes, right? What do they call it? Ecclesiastes or whatever that god's name was? The staff of Ecclesiastes. Damn, I always mess that word up. But you know what I'm talking about, right? It's whenever you see the ambulance go by and it's got a staff and there's like one serpent wrapped around it, which is one variation, or two serpents intertwined and there's wings at the top, okay? That's what we're talking about. Now, it all depends on your perspective, if you see good or bad, all right? Now, we're going to finish up here. So, some of them saw the concept of the serpent as a liberating savior type. Others would see it as something terrible, something evil. It all depends on your energy, all right, and how you vibe or don't vibe with other energies. The Demiurge, it was in opposition to the Demiurge, or the creator god, identified with the Hebrew god of the Old Testament, Yahweh, which I have identified with the apex dome itself, which is the shield of Zeus, which has the face of Medusa, which produces all these fiery serpents, seraphim, and they descend from above. Okay? So there's one energetic force which comes up out of the earth, which is earth-giving or life-giving earth energy, terrestrial beams of plasma that shoot up to the heavens. There is an opposition to it, and that's a straight and narrow path as well. That's the arrow, the holy arrow, right? The beam, straight and narrow. In opposition to the multiple strands, the divided energy that comes in as fiery serpents and seraphim and the snakes or the hair of Medusa, etc. Okay? Gnostic Christians consider the Hebrew God of the Old Testament as the evil, false God and the creator of the material universe. Okay, I get that, but I think both of them help to actually shape this world physically. The Hebrew God of the Old Testament, the false God and the creator of the material universe, and the unknown God of the gospel, the Father of Jesus Christ, and the creator of the spiritual world as the true good God. Now, today is Easter, so I might as well, mention this concept. First and foremost, it's named after Ishtar, right, which is also related to Inanna and the moon goddess and stuff like that. But what Easter celebrates is not rabbits. It is not finding colorful eggs. It is none of the tradition. It's definitely not buying Easter baskets and candy for people to eat or whatever. Okay. This is the day when Jesus, as the light of the world, he was dead. And so his spirit, right, or his plasma afterglow from my lens, right, was sucked up into the heavens. I just did a video called When Jesus Was Eaten by the Sky. And that's all about Easter. That's all about the spirit of Jesus being able to finally leave and rise. And that afterglow of where that plasma beam once was rises up when the sky opens up and the atmosphere depressurizes, and it sucks up the aurora borealis and other surrounding, phenomenon, lights in the skies, and it all gets sucked up and leaves this world, goes into the heavens, etc., where there are many mansions, where there's many other earths and many other fractal versions of earth out there, the multiverse, all that stuff. But let's finish up. So we talked about the Ophites. We talked about the different versions of the serpent within Christianity, the Abrahamic religions. We talked about Yaldabaoth, Yahweh as it is seen by the Gnostics. We talked about word origins and etymological roots of words, and better understand the meanings of things like seraph and naga and things of that nature. We also have the instance of the caduceus. So yes, these are the staffs I was forgetting. The staff of Mercury. Now Mercury is the same thing as Moses. Okay, same thing as Mars and all this stuff. Mercury is the god that communicates to the humans on behalf of the other gods. So he imparts divine knowledge to us, okay, which is the same thing that a dragon does, same thing that the serpent teachers did or whatnot, okay? They impart knowledge to the recipient, all right? Which is why Mercury has this staff with the snakes intertwined on it. The caduceus, that's why they use it as a medical symbol. The Chinese dragon, we talked about that, how the dragons, the serpents of old, they didn't have legs. They didn't have little arms and Tyrannosaurus arms and, any of that. They didn't have mustaches, okay? They were worms. They were filaments in the heavens, moving about, led by a ball of plasma or a toroidal field, and just streaking along as they went. They were given those things over time because they became personified and people lost the knowledge of it. Let's see. Oh, so there's a church of God with signs following. They talked about how people would be able to handle the serpents and handle the snakes and not get bit or whatever. I believe that's a reference to this Faraday suits and just learning mechanics and technology and stuff that allows us to work with electricity. Okay, basically. Dragons in Greek mythology. We talked about different types. They split off. There's even the dragon within Greek mythology that guards the place called Colchis, where the golden fleece was hung, right? The golden fleece is the golden lamb, or the lamp, which is literally what the word means. The lamp, the glowing of the lamb that lights up paradise, which is Hyperborea and the Garden of Eden, right? And there's a dragon guarding that golden fleece, or that shining lamb. The word gold also just means to shine, okay? Not to reflect, but to shine. Also, we made sort of a reference to, what's that dragon version where you cut off one head and two grows back? I always forget that. It's got something to do with water. Hydra. Okay, that's the Hydra. Same thing, okay, that there's waters above and the dragons come through those waters above. And, they're actually parted. Right? All the waters will be removed because of this depressurization. But the Hydra comes through. It splits off as it comes down because it's plasma coming down towards the earth. And it'll have a main branch or a main body. And then it splits its heads into different heads or whatever. That's plasma too. Dragons in Greek mythology. Lucifer. Also, some people see Lucifer as good. Some people see Lucifer as evil. I don't care. Honestly, really either way, because I don't see it as either. I see Lucifer as light. And light that is the light of the gods. It's a different form of light. It's a divine light. This is fire that comes down from the sky, the fire from heaven, heavenly fire, divine fire. It's not fire at all. It's plasma. Let's see. The Naga, we talked about that word. Nahash and Naga and how they're related. Let's see. Ophis, we talked a little bit about that. Apep, also we didn't really mention Apep, but that's also within Egyptian mythology and religion, was the destroyer. So that's a serpent form that destroys this world, which is you know, a form of plasma that comes in. This is why I call it the plasma apocalypse, okay? So it's Ragnarok. It's the battle between both that are here at the same time. When you have both here at the same time, that's the cosmic wedding. That's depicted on all your movies as the wedding that just was ill-fated. That these two people, positive and negative, they can't be together. And if they are, the world ends. Okay? So they're always torn apart. That is the sky, Father Sky, and Mother Earth together when they open up and they intermingle. Okay? The Rod of Asclepius. That's it. Okay, thank you. So same thing. The Rod of Asclepius is basically the same thing as the caduceus. Okay? Just two different flavors of the same thing. Serpent's seed, right? So that is a particular energy that is resonant within some people in this world. I should say many. The seed of the serpent is probably resonant within many people during this time because this is the time of Satan. Cake Town! Hey, what's up, Cake Town? High five. All right. Snake worship. So this is where the whole snake worship comes from. All right. People have forgotten the origins. They should not be worshiping animals, in my opinion. Okay. They can, if you want to. See, he's handling the snakes. That's snake charming. That's originally snake charming. Okay. This whole messing around with actual snake things is whatever. That's part of the season of Satan in my mind. The staff of Moses. We talked about all that stuff, and I'm done. That's pretty much it for today's live stream. Is anything else? Oh, Tan, as in Tanin. Remember I said there was a dragon called Tanin, or Tannin, Biff Tannen, right? The root of Tanin is Tn, or Tav Nun, right? And it means, it doesn't mean anything in modern Hebrew, but in ancient or Paleo Hebrew and Phoenician, the word Tan meant to repeat or to recite, and it implied instruction. So the Tanin, multiple of those who instruct, the instructors, the dragon teachers, the Naga, etc., and so on and so forth. All right, Al. Hopefully that helps me to get to 1 million subscribers so I can get out of this crazy place. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ, saying good vibes and goodbye.
In a time when an ancient cataclysm is about to return, one book holds the key to unlocking the biggest secret in all of history. JayDreamerZ presents Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse. Study it, and you'll discover the very real details behind the reoccurring event that resets civilizations and reshapes the entire world. Bridging the gap between fiction and fact, this book is a must-have for all truth seekers. Then in his second book, you'll learn about the one place of refuge from this world storm. You'll explore the ends of the earth, find the fountain of youth, and envision yourself enveloped in the vapor canopy. In Ancient Oblivion, Return to Hyperborea. Available now. Order direct from JayDreamerZ and receive your very own autographed copy. Go to JayDreamerZ.com for more information on our Ancient Oblivion and the Plasma Apocalypse, and sign up for a free 24-hour cram session with a complimentary day pass. The end is near, so order now before it's too late.